preemptively, if you're a furry, if you enjoy furry-isms, and you're not, you know, a Nazi or have sex with animals or whatever weird thing that furries happen to do sometimes, you're good, all right? This is not me saying all furries are awful. I don't care if you're a furry. It's just when the shit gets weird, it's time to calm down. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? You go woof woof. But if you go in a woof woof, we got a problem.
In recent years, the term furry has come to be associated with a group whose identity and affiliations remain mostly vague. While many people seem to readily accept the moniker of furry, used as both a noun and adjective, there appears to be little to no unifying body nor statement of ideals that defines them. Still, the artwork that pervades this group is of a definitively cartoonish style, often using anime and manga, Disney cartoons, and animated movies and television shows from the 80s and 90s for influences. While considered their own group, they are frequently found in other fandoms, adapting their furry interests to whatever other fandom or activity in which they are involved. Furry avatars are especially common on forums and social media sites. So what are
furry
furries?
avatars, yes. Furry porn.
By the 1940s, Walt Disney Productions Limited had not only become incredibly profitable, but also
some of the best paying and lucrative commission artwork is for furry porn. Of course. Dude. You wonder why, like, artists end up making that shit? It's because of money. Don't be mean to furries. I'm not being mean to furries. I preemptively said that at the beginning, all right? This is not, no, that is the worst timing for that alert. Thank you so much, Cotton.
so ubiquitous in American culture. Throughout the 1930s, their movies
and
animated shorts had
Rule
reached national
34 of me.
popularity.
Actually, I think there is. If I remember correct. No, it's a fan fiction. Maybe that's what it is.
After America entered World War II, they were commissioned extensively to produce widely viewed propaganda films and training animations for the military. They were best known for their anthropomorphized animals directed towards a family audience, and their cartoonish, rounded style and target demographic became a standard for artists working on these sorts of characters. This style was based off of similarly cartoonish humanoid depictions of animals, starting in the latter half of the 1800s, which would come to be known as the funny animal style. But as the
I know. Wait. What is this? There's a book that I read when I was a kid that looked like this. What was it called?
This was occurring, post-war countercultural movements were taking notice of the trend. One of these was the underground comics scene, stylized with an X, which often utilized a similar style to Disney's family-friendly cartoons in order to parody it by putting original characters into various adult situations, almost always involving violence, drugs, sex, or a combination of the three. These would be printed and distributed by independent publishers, allowing them to avoid the content guidelines of traditional publications. The funny animals were not exempt from this treatment, and they would occasionally make appearances. One of these independent works, however, would reach a popularity beyond that of its contemporaries, a comic strip called Fritz the Cat, which began printing in 1965. It depicted the eponymous anthropomorphic character, a disillusioned and depressed philanderer, in a city populated by other human-like animals. This character proved so popular that an 80-minute-long animated movie was created based on the intellectual property, independently produced and rated X, making a large return on investment. Inspired in part by Fritz the Cat, an independent project called Voodie was proposed by a pair of professional cartoonists. They explained their logic and plans in a proposal which they printed on February 29, 1976.
Oh, I remember.
Quote, Ken Fletcher and I, Reed Walker, have been talking about this for a long time, and we feel that comics today, both over and underground, are entirely too serious.
It's on YouTube.
So Voodie
Fritz
is
and the
being
Cat?
created.
Wait, is that? It's bad? Am I okay? Is it like to the point where I can't watch it on stream? Is it that bad? I need to know. It's porn? Then how is it on YouTube?
Black.
How is this on YouTube? What? How is that on YouTube? How is that on YouTube? That's so bad. I was gone. What happened? I can't show it on stream. There's a old movie called Fritz the Cat. I remember my parents taking me to the drive-in to watch that as the top comment. So glad I wasn't alive in the 70s. I'm not offended by this. It just reminded me of how even in the 70s, life must have sucked. YouTube Kids. Dude, that would be hilarious if it was on YouTube Kids. Here, this doesn't show, here, chat, I'll just show this. This doesn't show any boobs. Okay, this just gives an idea of how bad it is. There you go. You see it? You see it?
as a showplace for irresponsible silliness, and since mass audiences aren't as tolerant of silliness as artists themselves tend to be, we decided to make it an amateur press association rather than a magazine. Do you have, or could you create for us, a page or two of irresponsibly silly stuff which nobody else would have the patience to look at, preferably without human characters? You see, the whole point of funny animal fandom, incorporating funny vegetables, funny minerals, and funny machines fandoms, is that humans in general are too serious. They get puffed up and self-important and full of this insatiable desire for impact and significance. Human characters are self-righteous, know all the answers, and are ready to enforce them on everyone else. We don't want all that seriousness here. There's already enough everywhere else. Well, anyways, we'd like to get funny animals back to the status they deserve, at least among fellow cartoonists. If you're like us, you owe funny animals quite a lot for the part they probably played in your development as an artist.
So it's just saying, like, animals, like humans suck and animals are more chill?
He also explains their distribution structure. In an APA, the individual members send in identical copies of their publication to the official editor, sometimes called a central mailer or something similar, who shuffles the copies out into mailings that contain a copy of each contributor's publication, APA zine. The mailings are then distributed, one copy to each member. They detail their vision for the APA. We'd like Voodoo to be a bi-monthly 8.5 by 11 volume dominated by cartoon art of all kinds, with some personal news and mailing comments from the members. A place where you can just wig out without having to think about the usual market considerations. No censorship, mixed media, offset, Mimeo, Ditto, Silkscreen.
So they wanted to do animals just so they could just go ham and not worry about, all right. That's weird. All right. I'm gonna pull it up on the side so I am aware. Oh, it's a full, okay. I'm not opening that. I am not opening that. I'm not opening that. Okay.
Block print, silly putty, whatever you can think of. No requirements except that you keep those serious people as much out of it as possible. Humans are okay, but only when they're funny animals, too. Sex and violence is okay, as long as it's not human sex and violence.
That makes sense.
The artistic demands for Voodoo would be high, requesting work only from people whom they termed skilled cartoonists. The first issue would be sent to contributors in April of 1976. Though utilizing an APA distribution structure for a visual medium hadn't been practiced before, advancements in photocopying technology meant that artists could make copies of their work both easier and cheaper than ever before.
You know, it's ironic because the video I'm working on, chat, there's a lot of old animated shows. I don't know if I should spoil it. It has to do with something similar to this, but I'm not going to spoil it.
It proved a remarkable success among those admitted, but the exclusivity meant that many were unable to receive their own copies. But Voodoo gave an outlet to some of those artists who had a greater interest in funny animals, and soon that enthusiasm would spread. In the early
Man, that is definitely someone who had something to do with furries.
1970s, a man named Mark Merlino had begun a tradition of collecting and showing bootlegged television shows at science fiction conventions in his hotel room. One night, at the first LosCon convention in Los Angeles in 1975, he performed a screening which included a number of Japanese animated shows aired on a local television station in Hawaii. The giant robot shows proved especially popular, and the interest was so great that he founded a monthly club devoted to screening Japanese animation, which was named the Cartoon/Fantasy Organization, or CFO. At first, they only had access to bootlegs, but soon they created connections with people in Japan who had a special interest in old American shows, and the CFO would begin trading with them to receive high-quality videotapes of the newest Japanese animated shows. Many of these enthusiasts who were attracted to Japanese animation had overlapping interests in the funny animal fandom, perhaps in part because of the frequency of characters with animal-like visual traits. This was likely encouraged by Merlino, who was a funny animal fan himself and would even...
a funny animal fan. Could we just start calling all furry porn just funny animals?
Design a funny animal character to serve as the group's mascot.
Oh, it's a funny animal.
Some members would create stop-motion animation featuring her to serve as bumpers at CFO meetings. They also had an interest in spreading Japanese animation to the rest of America and increasing its popularity domestically. To do this, they created other, smaller clubs in cities around the country, though the two major ones would be the original in Los Angeles and another in New York City, with both animation and funny animal fans. As the CFO was growing, small, funny animal-focused independent magazines, or zines, were entering production. They would feature both visual art and writing, but the former proved much more popular and would soon come to dominate them, especially as photocopying grew to be cheaper, more accessible.
Wait, is that Kimbo? Is it Kimba? Kimba, not Kimbo. It doesn't stay in tune. Fuck, I'll fix it later, honey. That's Kimbo, right?
And of higher quality. Unlike APAs, these zines were available to the public, not only the contributing artists, and they helped strengthen interest in the fandom as they grew more prolific at the outset of the 80s. The quality of the art would vary greatly, with work submitted by both professionals and amateurs of all skill levels, though almost all drew in a definitively cartoonish style. Here, the overlap between the anime and funny animal fandoms would become apparent, with much of the visual art featuring style choices and design clearly influenced by Japanese animation. While no metrics have been gathered, it's likely that a majority of these zines include pornography of funny animal characters, and some
funny is funny.
Some zines consisted primarily of this sort of content, though the ratio of pornographic to non-pornographic artwork varied widely between each zine. Some of these zines would grow even more specific in their targeted content, focusing on niche groups within an already small fandom.
It's hilarious.
Recognizing their reach, the CFO would soon begin advertising in these zines, offering discounts for members at science fiction convention booths if they showed their membership card. But the CFO was not the only group forming around funny animals. In 1980, an artist named Steve Galacci attended the—
Dude, these people! Like, come on, man! Like, can one of them just not look like a creep? Can one of them just look like a normal person? Why do they all have to look like creeps?
World Science Fiction Convention held in Boston that year, where he submitted artwork of his anthropomorphic character Irma Felna. A number of the attendees enjoyed his artwork and began speaking with him, forming a small group around him and discussing funny animals. He would continue to print artwork of Irma Felna and sell these at conventions, quickly gathering people around him each time. These interested parties would later meet at other conventions in what came to be known informally as Galacci groups, where they would share their interests with each other and form friendships. For some time, a sentiment had been growing in the funny animal fandom that there was a lack of funny animal media done in a more serious manner.
I need more funny animals!
Galacci created Albedo Anthropomorphics, a comic anthology devoted to a more serious treatment of funny animals, in 1983. Perhaps most notably, in issue 2, Albedo would publish the first appearance of Usagi Yojimbo, a now internationally recognized intellectual property. Around this time, bulletin board systems, or BBSs, were beginning to grow in popularity. Acting as an early version of the internet, these message boards allowed users to share files and information, as well as participate in text chat over a phone line, with the correct programs and hardware. Though the price of computers and the technical knowledge required to use them stymied their proliferation, they would see widespread usage among the funny animal fandom, which already shared many members with geek culture. One board in particular, the Tiger's Den, would quickly find that a majority of its user base consisted of funny animal fans, and so Mark Merlino would take ownership of the Tiger's Den and move the servers to his house. This BBS and others like it would help funny animal fans connect and share their interests, growing the fandom considerably and allowing them to coordinate and meet at conventions much easier. But soon, these groups would grow in size at a rate that none at the time could have predicted.
So basically furry started from furry porn. I'm just assuming. Right?
At science fiction conventions, it was common practice for people to host small parties in their hotel rooms, often limited to artists who were presenting work at the convention. In 1985, however, at a convention called WesterCon, some attendees offered Mark Merlino and his partner Rod O'Reilly their room at the Red Lion Inn to use for a party, where they featured a special copy of the then extremely rare Animalympics special with other congoers. It was around this time that a new name for the fandom was disseminated, the furry fandom. Mark Merlino at a convention panel explains his understanding of where this change began.
This is the creator of the furry fandom, chat. How fitting. I was honestly hoping it was just going to be a regular dude. But this guy, this is the guy who made the furries.
Bruce Pells and his plushy fans, who started calling themselves fuzzy fans in the Lost Fuzz clubhouse. These are people who collected plush animals as a collection, not for any other reason. Okay? And this guy who called himself
wearing a cheetah shirt too.
Really wasn't a furry to speak of. I mean, he would let furries into his
fuzzy wuzzy ooh.
He didn't mind
nuzzles your bulgy wolgy.
Suggested that we were furry fans. He suggested the name, and it just kind of stuck.
Other people give alternative accounts of its inception,
Wasn't
however,
this guy
no
in Tiger
definitive
King?
origin has been discovered. This word would be used both as a noun and an adjective to describe those within the fandom and
like
the anthropomorphic art core to it, calling the people within it furries. By the following year, room parties based on furry interests would become a regular occurrence at conventions, which became known as furry parties. What exactly occurred at these parties is not documented, but the promotional material was suggested.
I wonder what happened at those parties, chat. One can only wonder.
One flyer from RoseCon in
I wanna
1998
know!
depicts a naked anthropomorphic character
Did they
saying,
have sex
"No, ma'am, the
in
morality
costumes?
and fandom party is next
I wanna
door."
know.
Other promotional material was often of a similarly risque nature. Eventually, interest in these parties grew to a point that the rooms couldn't contain them, and there was a belief that the fandom had grown large enough that the room parties could be turned into a convention. And so, to test this theory, Merlino and O'Reilly reserved space with the Holiday Inn in Costa Mesa, California, to hold what they named ConFurence Zero. The convention was sparse, with basic events and nothing resembling a celebrity guest. Though only 65 people arrived, it was enough for the organizers to consider it a success. And they took
juggling, man. He's just doing it for fun. They're having conversations. There's just a dude juggling. How do they fit the stereotype so hard? How do they fit it so hard? He's just chilling in the back, juggling.
Oh my God. The fact that two people dressed up as anthropomorphic animals, one in leather fetish gear.
God damn, who is she? Who is she?
The following year, they held what they called the first real convention, and this one was far more successful, with double the attendance and featuring artists prominent among those who read the independent zines. Around this time, another important interpersonal tool was being utilized by the furry fandom, the multi-user dungeon.
Oh, this Chuck E. Cheese
Side
is
note,
weird, Mom,
in the 80s,
take me
multi-user
home.
dungeons, MUDs, or
Where's
MUDs,
the
had proven
pizza?
an extremely popular pastime for computer users, acting as an early multiplayer experience that played and looked very similar to a text-based adventure game. Users were able to change the world in ways that other players could experience, while also communicating through text. They connected through the internet, which was becoming more accessible around this time, using a protocol called Telnet. Mucks proved to be a popular variant of MUD, especially for role players, due to the way that they were structured. They typically did not feature combat, but instead focused on building and interaction.
This is where the term getting some tail comes from?
In 1990, a muck specifically for furries was created, which they named Furry Muck. While this was the first furry-centered one, more were created in later years. They soon proved to be a popular method for furries to communicate and interact regularly with one another, even over great distances. Then, in December, a Usenet board specifically for furries was created, with a few others being made later under different tags. Here, furries were able to stay current with developments in the community and discuss further with each other. It quickly became a central part of the furry community, with many major members participating. Throughout the 90s, many smaller fan gatherings called fur meets would begin to form as well, sometimes with scarcely more than a dozen people.
Dude, I don't know why I was hoping furries started from just like people enjoying like dressing up. I honestly was hoping it would start by like people who like to dress up in Halloween costumes all the time, but they just wanted to dress up as animals. That's what I was hoping. But man, it had to be this. It had to be porn. It had to be.
While ConFurence continued to grow into the hundreds, the problems with such a large population appeared first in the early 1990s.
Look at, dude, they're cheesing, bruh. They're so happy. I mean, I guess I can't knock their happiness, but they're cheesing over here, dude.
Now, to whip this back around to conventions, one of the things we had to deal with, which helps once you're at a hotel for more than 1 year, was there were people who would sabotage the convention any way they could. And the original way is they would try to tell people, they'd call up the hotel anonymously and say, they're selling bootleg videotapes. And we actually had to deal with police who came to the convention to go through the dealer's room looking for people selling bootleg videotapes. Then after that,
dude, the fucking like 80s and 90s where they actually cared about bootleg movies. Oh man,
this is a convention for pedophiles. There are people selling, illegal underage art, and photos and movies and such in there.
Oh well, that can't chat. Can you sell child porn of drawn animals? Is that the loophole? Is animals? Just make them look like animals,
Shut the convention down. And this still happens.
The furry population increased even further with the proliferation of a new invention that was gaining popularity, the World Wide Web. This network allowed people who could afford it to create their own websites where they could host text and images. In an effort to give the fandom an easier way to—
Right when the world became terrible, chat. This is Right when
share
the world
artwork,
became
a
shitty.
man named Brian W. Anton opened his private
kidding.
image hosting site, the Veil
It just made it more obvious that the world was shitty.
Central Library to allow others to upload their own works. Soon after, Fur Nation was opened with the same purpose
God
of making
damn.
art more accessible while also allowing
Fur Nation, bro. Look at your portal to the furry realm. Oh my god. Is this MySpace?
networking. Then, in 1996, a new virtual world was made available that catered specifically to furries, named Furcadia. What made it unique
I've
was
heard
that
of
it
that.
could be easily downloaded and run on a PC, and featured a colorful, isometric graphical interface, both factors making it far more accessible than the
I've heard of
text-based
Furcadia.
MUX. According to an interview with some of the game's producers, the population tripled yearly for the first 5 years it was available to the public. The proliferation of these online resources meant that, for a large portion of furries, the zines that had been so popular through the 80s were outmoded. For a time, the increased connectivity allowed furries to discover new zines and
Is this that meme of like the girl on the couch with the guys
subscribe
behind
to
her?
them, but eventually, increasing internet speeds made it easier to upload higher quality
All right.
images online. All of these factors together saw a rapid, exponential increase in people referring to
makes me
themselves as
uncomfortable,
furry,
chat.
but with the increase in size came the inevitable problems that fandoms face, and they would be extreme.
Would I play it on stream?
After the first year of
Yes.
ConFurence, each successive convention would grow by more than 100 every year throughout the 1990s. However, as the crowd grew, the convention gained more and more of a reputation for wildness and eroticism beyond only the selling of pornography. One man, by the name of Exline, released an open letter to Mark Merlino on the Furry Usenet board on February 8, 1997, illustrating just how extreme the issue had grown at ConFurence. He opens with, quote, "Mark, this letter is in regards to a serious problem that we encountered at ConFurence 8. I direct this letter at you personally because
ConFurence. Can we get a round of applause for that pun? ConFurence.
I assume you are still in charge and responsible for the convention in general. I say I assume because certain matters have made me question your authority regarding the running of this con. Mark, pay very close attention to what you're reading. I do not want any misunderstandings." Klein goes on to describe several incidents while he was at the convention. Quote, "On Thursday, the day of my arrival, on our way to get something to eat at the hotel coffee shop, we watched two young men deliberately waiting for what we saw to be mundanes see them, and proceed to deep-throat each other in a rather blatant manner in the hotel lobby, obviously getting a kick out of offending people. This went on for the period of time it took us to get across the lobby and into the coffee shop. They were still there when we left. Besides that, what the hell was one of your security doing walking around in drag? What's that got to do with the so-called premise of the convention, along with not aiding in the confidence people would be feeling in approaching security? That was very immature and unprofessional." After
Okay,
this,
why is drag a problem? Like, I get two dudes, you know, going at it, deep throating in the hallway, but you're in furry costumes. Why is drag bad? What? You're literally in furry costumes.
he describes a scene which has now become infamous in the furry fandom and was soon corroborated by other Usenet posters. Quote, "There was a situation in an elevator Saturday evening when I was taking some important guests back to my room for business. We were discussing said business in the elevator on our way up to the room when one of the gentlemen with me leaned back against the wall, as most people do, when he found his side and pants covered in semen. Some diseased bottom feeder couldn't contain himself and squirted all over the wall." He then discusses his concern with the direction of the
Who are these people, dude? What? They just squirting their jizz everywhere. What is going on?
convention. Quote, "When did you decide to make this convention something other than anthropomorphic? What are you going to do about this lunatic fringe that is seeping into the convention? And understand this, I don't care whether they're alternative lifestylists or otherwise, or if they make love to their pets or any other preference. That's not what I'm addressing."
You don't care if they have sex with their pets? That's something you should care about. What? This guy, he's all over the place, man.
What are you going to do about the people who aren't interested in attending this convention for its intended purposes? We overheard others on more than one occasion ask, "What's a furry?" and receive the answer, "I don't know, I'm just here for the parties and sex." What are you going to do about these same people who are going about methodically ruining the reputations of the alternative lifestylists as well? And if you don't think there's
To be fair, the furries did start with furry porn, so to say that it's ridiculous that people are going there to just have sex, come on.
a problem with this, you're not looking in the right places. Get your head out of your ass and clean up your fucking act. I'm not the only one that's pissed about this. He goes on to indict Mark Merlino for driving out the old regular attendees, but immediately afterwards, he talked about his experience at what had come to be known as pet auctions, and suggests he was allowing prostitution. Quote, "Gee, Mark, innocent, naive us. We thought it was going to be a pet auction, as in people in costumes and anthropomorphically inclined adopting others of similar interests for the benefit of charity. We found it was nothing more than a queer auction." Kishma offered to do a lap dance as Tashta, her zebra dancer, to the highest bidder.
Okay.
If she was offering this to a furry audience, she probably would have brought the house down. Instead, she got crickets. Know what this means, Mark? She went for $28. And yet, some little cretin in tight black shorts offering veiled sex went for $180. In fact, all those offering extras at the discretion of the pet sold for over $40. Mark, all of this came off as a thinly disguised excuse for pandering. You're lucky it wasn't shut down. There was also the fear that people with cameras were attending specifically to smear the fandom, a fear spurred by a general desire.
What do you mean smear the fandom? Like, this is kind of confusing to me. Isn't that what the fandom originally was in the first place? Is kind of just people who loved thinking about anthropomorphic animals as sexual objects?
For the fandom to be accepted by those from without. These sentiments were a demonstration of a concern and frustration that had been building in the furry fandom for some time, and soon they would culminate into a moment that would help define more concretely what it meant to be a part of the furry community.
We draw the
In late
line at
1998, a woman named Charlotte Trotman wrote a public letter online under the name Squee Rat, entitled "This Sordid Little Business," alternatively known as the Furry Manifesto, and it expanded upon Ed Klein's letter to apply it to the greater furry fandom. She opened with a strong indictment. Quote, "I remember when being a pervert was a bad thing. If you were warped, you tried to hide it, and good for you if you did. If you were going to polish your rod to autopsy photos or bugger a Shetland pony, you did it in the privacy of your own sick, sad home. No one else, especially not me, had to know, and that was great. The best part was, if you decided to crawl out on the roof and inform the neighborhood via midnight megaphone that being urinated on got you hot, you would be told in no uncertain terms how very diseased you were. Most people I know don't have too much trouble
Kink shaming?
distinguishing between a lifestyle choice and a warning sign. Yep, in many parts of the world, the idea of making love to Andy Panda is still regarded as somewhat misguided. Most parts, that is, except furry fandom. I don't know what the hell happened here." Apparently out of ignorance, she goes on to misattribute the origins of the fandom as entirely non-sexual. Quote, "To me, and a lot of other people, furry simply means a fondness for animal-human combinations in art, movies, books, whatever. If you're biased towards Redwall novels, have a
at least know your history.
soft spot for anime cat girls, or can't drag yourself away from The Secret of Nim, chances are excellent that you're at least slightly fur-inclined. That's pretty cool by me. The simple definition is probably what started furry fandom in the first place." She then goes on to list the groups in the fandom she finds particularly egregious. Quote, "The most obvious one so far would be suspicions of bestiality. This wouldn't be a problem if the furs that did it weren't so damn
This all started from furry animals, chat. Or no, funny animals.
proud of it.
Funny
For those of you that
animals.
were out sick that day in sex ed class, don't fuck your pets. Raping Fido is a 100% bad idea. You're making us all look bad, goddammit. Her second group of interest was also related to sex. Quote,
Oh my
"As we
God.
descend just a step deeper into hell, we stumble across the path of the plushophile." That's shorthand for, "I find this Miko doll intensely erotic." These are the people who
So
use
having
FAO
sex with
Schwartz
plush
as a
dolls,
singles bar.
poggers?
I don't know who decided that this was a valid excuse for a sex life, but he probably still lives in his mother's basement. You don't have to earn a degree
I don't understand. Like, so it's just furries getting mad at furries for being furries. Is that really all this is?
in psychology to figure out how thickly laden with sexual dysfunction the very concept of plushophilia is.
See, what I think happened is furries started out kind of risque and sexualized and stuff. But then people came in thinking it wasn't, thinking it was just about the animation and the love for animals in animation and stuff. And those people are mad because the people who it's basically furries against furs at this point.
She then attacked what were known as furry lifestylers. Quote, Glee.
Oh
We've got us some self-righteous little pokers down here. You see, just drawing cartoon animals or enjoying Watership Down doesn't make you a furry. No, you're not good enough. You're not a furry if it's just a hobby. If you don't think you're the astrally
I mean, yeah, that's kind of how they act.
projected soul of a wolf trapped in a human body, or you don't answer the phone with a meow, you're not a furry. Yup, don't you feel terribly inferior now? Christ on a fire engine, what some people will try and force on you.
Then why be a furry if it's just you just like movies with animals in them? You know? That's not, like, I don't know, furry elitism? Yeah. But I thought that's the whole thing, isn't it? I thought the whole thing was just like You full force it. You know, you gung-ho. I thought that's how furries were, right? You know, you just send it. You just gung-ho it into the thing. I don't even know what's going on. Honestly, me neither. It literally, all this is, it just sounds like furries who are mad that furries are mad at them for not being furry enough. It's elitism, gatekeeping furryism.
Next, she speaks on those who attach New Age beliefs to the fandom. Quote, "There are no werewolves. Anyone who claims to turn into a giant dog at the whim of a celestial body should be mercilessly ostracized and laughed at with maximum cruelty."
But that's furries! All right, so they're just going to complain for a while.
These concerns were founded in the scattered news stories that were beginning to appear about the furry fandom during the 90s, often showcasing their unconventional sexual habits.
Many of those attending the conference here told us that being furry is just innocent child's play, adults pretending to be kids. But a lot of what goes on here is undeniably adult-oriented, and it's not for everyone.
Anyways, opening bid, $2.
At the pet auction, for instance, furries bid for back.
Who is she?
$17.50.
And other pet services.
The motives that are involved in many different areas would tend to be a little bit controversial. I don't really go in that direction.
And the furry strip show is definitely not kid stuff.
As far back as 1994, local news outlets were beginning to write pieces on them.
Imagine the smell, chat. Imagine the smell, dude. Like, those costumes gotta make him sweat.
March 1994 edition of Wired magazine wrote about those furries who used mucks. Quote, "Take furry muck, for instance, the first anthropomorphic mud. It makes Lambda Moo look like the young Republicans. People describe themselves as furry, cuddly animals. More times than not, they have furry, cuddly animal sex." Unquote. Apparently, enough support was shown to her that Trotman penned a second piece, which...
Oh yeah, food upstairs? Perfect timing, chat. I'm so hungry after looking at all this furry stuff. It's getting me really famished. Give me 1 second, I'll be right back.
Which she titled A Modest Proposal, borrowing the title from Jonathan Swift's satirical essay. This writing, published on her personal website, reads so, quote, "Okay, so by now we all know I can complain, but I've always been a fan of the fix it or shut up philosophy. Below is a small proposal as to how. Furry fandom is an embarrassment. There's no getting around that, but that doesn't mean it's beyond repair. There was a time when the designation furry didn't double for zoophile, plushophile, psychopath, or naturist. It used to be fun, and people used to know exactly where you stood when you referred to yourself as a furry. But these days, people hate being called as much. They cringe at the thought of being lumped together with the platoons of perverts who have decided to say—
Then make a new thing. You know? Like, make a new group. Why are you trying to correct a group that's so fucked up? Just make a new group, you know? Call them fuzzies. Or funny animals. Call them funny animals, you know?
Set up base camp under the guise of furrydom. A lot of cool people have dropped out of furriness altogether, rather than be associated with or pressured by these nutballs. I still miss Abe Groder. Agony, agony. I wrote this page as a response to the massive influx of support for the furry manifesto. Maybe there's hope for us after all. Furriness needs fixing, and I think I may have an idea. It's not enough to distance ourselves from the previously mentioned drooling maniacs. Even if, by some miracle, the masses rose up and managed to expel every last wacko from the fanbase, the name furry has taken on connotations it will likely never shake. Common sense decrees a secession is in order. A subset needs forming, a group of furry types who want to make their interests known without being associated with the twitching crack babies and their crazed notions. I did a little brainstorming and came up with this. Burned fur. The name has a double meaning. Non-psycho furs can be called burned because anyone with a firm grasp on reality would clearly feel slighted by the screamingly deviant direction the fandom has taken. Another way of looking at it is the example made of furs who have spoken up against fandom perversion and been burned at the stake for it. Eric Bloomrich is the best example. There are others, of course. Once the manifesto is posted to Alt Lifestyle Furry, I'll probably end up being one of them. Unquote. This plan was quickly enacted. The burned furs established themselves on message boards.
That doesn't help, all right? Make an entire subsection, like not even a subsection. Make a whole other group, you know? You can't make a subsection. You need to make a whole other group. You know, it's just not gonna work.
As a loose coalition of furries, and they had the support of many prominent members of the community who were both personally frustrated with the fandom and concerned about its public image. However, even with the positive momentum behind them, they would begin to face trouble almost immediately. Trotman's proposal attracted many who were concerned about the state of the furry fandom, but their goals were ill-defined. New members would join who defined degeneracy differently from Trotman. The point of greatest contention
You guys see that? You guys reading what I'm reading?
We're concerned about the state of the furry
naked, gleaming, sweaty, glistening, naked boys.
Fandom, but their goals were ill-defined. New members would join who defined degeneracy differently from Trotman. The point of greatest contention was the belief that the sexualization of furries was a reprehensible activity, and there was a sentiment that artists who did so were violating their artistic integrity. This was in spite of the official Burned Fur website stating that they were not against furry pornography or sexual role-playing. Since the movement was so decentralized and their founding texts so vague, anybody, including these new members, could speak for the group, and they came to be associated with anti-homosexuality and prudishness. Even so, their influence would be felt in the core of the fandom.
Wait, is this how the Nazis were born? Like the furry Nazis? Is that how this was born? Oopsies. Using my left hand, give me a second.
In 1999, Mark Merlino gave control of ConFurence to a man named Daryl Exline, who made himself known as a burned fur shortly after taking possession of the convention. Many online furries were skeptical about the convention's future. Despite the mixed reception of the burned furs, other prominent furries began to join and offer their support, and one of the most publicly visible was a man named Eric Bloomrich, the same person mentioned in Trotman's modest proposal.
Come on, dude! No one saw that, right? He missed a censorship, chat. He missed a censorship. Breast or big?
Bloomrich would quickly become known as one of the most vocal members of the burned furs and a critic of the furry fandom. His stance had been well known for some time before the burned furs were created, but compared to Trotman, his vision for the fandom was much more restrictive and direct.
Yeah, on the first slide, he definitely missed something.
On October 30th, 2000, he made a statement on a furry Usenet board that would come to be associated with him in the fandom. Though he opens by stating that the writing was his alone, he quickly abandons this in his piece and invokes the entirety of the burned furs. It reads in part, quote, I warned that if the world at large should encounter our fandom through these elements, the fandom would be irreparably damaged, tainted as a haven for the sexually degenerate. I warned that the proliferation of pornography depicted to the world a fandom aberrant and despicable. Squeerat's manifesto led to the formation of a core group with no ideology, no cohesive structure, other than the common desire to bring about a change in the fandom. We didn't go far enough, fast enough. Our opponents were so brazen and so ubiquitous that our efforts, restricted as they were to the internet and a few cons, were unable to maintain and thicken the dangerously thin veil that separated our tainted fandom from public scrutiny. Is
this guy writing a book? What the fuck? What are these, like, descriptive words, bro? What the hell?
Saw that on The Daily Show. There he was, Kevin Duane, proudly displaying his filth to the prying cameras of Comedy Central. Well, in the wake of recent events, it has become clear that this will not do. We must acknowledge our bully pulpit and take on the forces.
No boob reduction. I declare, I am the man. Remember? I control it all. You signed a contract.
That would destroy our fandom by name. We must have the courage to mount the ivory tower, accept the uncomfortable mantle of authority, and state unequivocally our accusations against these foul excuses for human beings.
Dude, seriously, calm down with your grammar, bro. Like, they acting like they're writing the script for Shakespeare, dude. Calm down.
These people need to be exposed for what they are. They must be hounded, persecuted, and driven back into the maggot-ridden depths from which they emerged. Until they are, we cannot hope to make any progress toward the rehabilitation of the fandom they so gleefully and selfishly destroyed. He then goes down a list of people, but the first was Mark Merlino, one of the founders of ConFurence. Quote, I accuse Mark Merlino, who masterminded the debacle that was ConFurence 3, advertised almost exclusively through gay and lesbian resources. The man who came up with the egregiously vile decision to give every confirmed member of Furry Muck a free pass to the con. He goes on to indict other individuals for creating and selling pornography, calling one a whore to the dollar and accusing another of selling pornography to children. His last targets, which he called the most despicable of all, were those members of the fandom who hadn't spoken on the subject. He closed by comparing himself to Martin Luther King and John Rabba while calling Mark Merlino a demon. The reaction from the furry Usenet board was aggressively negative. Bloomrich was immediately attacked for his hyperbole and apparent misunderstanding of the sexual nature of the fandom from its inception, while being called out for his hypocrisy. Merlino's partner, Rod O'Reilly, would later defend Merlino.
Right off the bat, we might as well get into it because people are going to think about it. But people started noticing. Lo and behold, hey, guess what? There are LGBT people showing up at our furry conventions.
How dare they? How dare they? Furries are for straight white men who want to bust on each other. No homosexual.
And there are certain people whom that created a panic. because, you know, what are these LGBT people doing
gays!
in our perfectly heterosexual fandom?
No!
You're like, what?
What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do now?
But and then they're like, we see. You gay guys invited all of these weirdos in. You wrote them letters all personally and said, hey, come to our convention and make it perverted. And we're like,
By 2001...
Yes, of course. Blame the gays.
Few, if any, people identified with the movement anymore, pushed out by the rest of the community. While numerous people in the furry fandom still had their concerns, the Burned Furs nor any copycat group would have the same sort of sway they did. However, new technology and services were about to irrevocably change the fandom in a way that would have made it nearly impossible for the Burned Furs to achieve their aims, and perhaps made it unnecessary. In the early 2000s, the internet was seeing rapid expansion in terms of accessibility and speed, personal computers were gaining increased storage capacity and processing power, and scanning technology was becoming more detailed and widely available. These factors together would see a widespread increase in internet usage and digital image creation. Users could now also share images much more easily with one another, and furry artists would begin to use it frequently for this purpose. Digital artistic tools quickly found even more widespread usage among furries as well, being an ideal form of art for the internet. This process was expedited by
easier ways to make porn about dogs,
hosting websites being created and made available for free. The earliest was DeviantArt, which launched on August 7th.
This is how it began, chat. This is where it began. This is where it began, and this is where it still is. I should do a DeviantArt iceberg. Oh God, that would be awful. That would be awful.
2000 and shifted to hosting art in 2002. DeviantArt was a powerful tool for amateur artists at the time as a place they could upload and share their art. Since more and more furries were using the internet to coordinate and communicate, DeviantArt proved to be an ideal choice for them. However, there was one important limiting factor for the furry community. DeviantArt would allow nudity, but not pornography. Around that same time, another private project called YIFStar was being created to replace the old image archives being used to house furry artwork, the word YIF meaning anthropomorphic sex in the furry community. This website would act similarly to DeviantArt, but specifically for furry artwork and with no content restrictions. Soon after, other image hosting sites based around anthropomorphic artwork would appear, such as Sheezy Art in 2003 and Fur Affinity in 2005, the latter growing to be one of the largest repositories of anthropomorphic art. Due to the popularity of DeviantArt, however, many furries would continue to use the platform, sometimes in concert with other platforms. Eventually, furries became so prolific on the site that in 2006, a specific category for anthropomorphic artwork was created, establishing furries as a core demographic of the platform. Due to the new ubiquity of the internet, more and more furries were accessing both these new online resources as well as old ones, such as Furcadia. The increased connectivity of the internet was also making it possible for furries to communicate, advertise, and organize new conventions easier.
Midwest Fur Fest. Dude, I'm in the Midwest chat. Should I go?
Smaller conventions that had started in the 90s and early 2000s began growing at an exponential rate, with new conventions appearing in numerous cities across North America. Despite the success of these new conventions, or perhaps because of it, ConFurence would very abruptly begin to decline, even before ownership of the convention was passed to Daryl Exline. In 1998, the official attendance count was approximately 1,250, but the following year, it dipped by nearly a third to 850. After the board of directors announced a change of venue, another convention was set up to take its place in the area, and by 2003, attendance was just below 500, less than half of where it was only 5 years prior. At this point, the convention was closed. But even with the closure of ConFurence, the community continued to grow. The internet proved to be a powerful mechanism for furry artists to make money from their art, being able to take commissions much more easily and deliver them digitally. They could now draw directly for interested clients without having to attend conventions, though they still would prove a powerful method for artists to increase their popularity. These pieces of art would then often be uploaded to image hosting sites such as DeviantArt and Fur Affinity, allowing the artist to grow an easily visible, public body of work. Creating furry personas, or fursonas, grew ever more popular on these sites as well, since it was so easy to share them with one another, with the creators often commissioning or creating art depicting this furry version of themselves interacting with other fursonas as a surrogate or an avatar. At this point, the furry community began to decentralize more and more, encouraged by the structure of the internet. Different websites and small groups began to form around artists, styles, and interests, including pornographic and non-pornographic material, while image hosting sites made it easy for users to filter out the sort of content they were seeking from their ever-growing databases. Where the furry fandom used to be a more unified entity based on a few message boards and a convention.
So do you not have anything else to unbox? Nope, sorry. This is it, chat. This is what we're doing now.
Now, people could seek out independent furry material without engaging with the community itself. Over time, furry costuming, or fursuiting, grew ever more refined, with craftspeople offering suits for sale and shipping them worldwide. Artists would expand from the traditional cartoonish style and develop their own, frequently borrowing styles from others within the fandom. Even so, the influence of anime and Disney is still often visible. Today, the furry community is scattered and splintered, subdivided into smaller sections both on the internet and in real life. These groups continue to grow more.
Oh, macro, micro, My Little Pony, Brony, Pokemon, pregnancy, Sonic. Yes! Oh, I know what I'm doing after this, chat. I know what I'm doing after this.
Specific as time goes on, organized by interests ranging from political affiliations to art styles to sexual fetishes, and they continue to subdivide. Regional furry conventions are common.
Wait, are those NFTs? Yo, are these NFTs though? Like, these could be NFTs.
And they continue to subdivide. Regional furry conventions are common, each with their own rules and restrictions on art and conduct. Even the definition of furry appears to mean something different to every person who claims the moniker. To some, it means actively taking part in a community of other people with interest in anthropomorphic animals, while to others it means only an enjoyment of such media. But no matter how each person may define it, one thing is clear: the furries are here to stay.
Yay. Now it's time to walk away. I hope you enjoyed your stay. Did you laugh or cry or maybe subscribed? I'll thank you either way. You know I will miss you. I hope you return. Tell your friend or your mother to get me more views, please.